Everyone, today we're going to tell you a story that will touch every heart. It's a story about trust, betrayal, and painful revelations. We all dream of true love, loyalty, and honesty, but what do you do when you find out that those we trusted have betrayed us? And what if that moment of infidelity becomes the starting point for an entirely new beginning? Think about it. What would you do if you discovered you were being deceived? Let's dive into one of the most powerful and painful stories of betrayal. This story might change the way you look at relationships forever. Stay with us because we're just getting started. I'd never be sharing this story, but here I am. It's one of those things that, at the time, felt like it was happening to someone else, like some twisted movie plot. But it was me. And now, years later, I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. This isn't just about infidelity. It's about what happens when your entire life unravels in front of you, when everything you thought you knew about the person you loved turns out to be a lie. I'll start from the beginning. My wife, Emma, and I had been married for almost a decade. We met in college, and back then, I thought she was the one. She was funny, smart, ambitious, and just magnetic. People loved being around her. We had our ups and downs, sure, but who doesn't? I always thought our relationship was built on something solid, something unshakable. We were best friends genuinely. Even when the passion faded a little, we still had that core connection. I believed that was enough, but in hindsight, I probably ignored the warning signs. Little things. Not huge red flags, nothing like an affair or something dramatic, but the cracks started appearing, and I didn't want to see them. She started becoming a little more distant, a little more withdrawn. Nothing too alarming at first. Just the usual signs of adulthood settling in. Work stress, social pressures, just the day-to-day grind of life. I didn't mind. I was busy too, and we didn't need constant reaffirmation, right? Then, about a year ago, we moved to a new city for my job. We'd both been living in the same place for almost 5 years, and the change should have been a good thing. New opportunities, new experiences. But it didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt, Emma wasn't herself. At first, I thought she was just adjusting, but it went on. She started spending more and more time out of the house doing her own thing, she said. She'd go for long walks, meet up with friends, or just disappear into the city. I didn't question it too much at first. I was busy with work, and honestly, I thought maybe she was just trying to find her own rhythm in a new place. It didn't occur to me that it could be anything more. But then came the first weird moment. She came home late one night, almost a little too late. I wasn't worried at first. Maybe she got caught up with friends, or she stayed longer at a work event. But she seemed different and distracted, like she wasn't really there. She said she had been out with colleagues, which wasn't uncommon, but there was something in her voice, some little hesitation that I couldn't quite place. The next few weeks were a blur. I noticed she was coming home later and later. One night, she didn't come home at all. I didn't panic immediately. I texted her a few times just to check in, but no answer. And then, around 3 a.m., she just walked in like it was no big deal. I asked where she'd been, and she said something vague like, just out with some people from work. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a weird, heavy feeling in my stomach. That night, I tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't. I stayed awake, lying in bed, my mind racing. I kept replaying our conversations, our moments together. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She was different, and not in a way that could be explained by work or stress. This was something deeper. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. It felt disgusting even as I did it, but I had to know. I couldn't ignore that sinking feeling anymore. I saw her meeting with someone at a cafe in the city center. He was a guy I recognized. I'll call him David. He was a friend from our early days together. I didn't think much of him back then, just a guy who'd been around, always present in group settings, but never someone I'd pay attention to. A harmless acquaintance. Or so, I thought. I kept my distance, watching from across the street. They were sitting close. Too close. The way they were talking, laughing, leaning into each other, something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the fact that they were spending time together. It was the way they were interacting. It felt intimate in a way that crossed the line of just being friends. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, but I still didn't know what. That night, she came home and I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I confronted her. At first, she denied everything, said I was overreacting, that I was just being paranoid. But I wasn't stupid. I had seen them. And then, finally, after a long silence, she broke. She told me the truth. It wasn't just an affair. It was something I couldn't even fathom. She had been seeing David for months, since before we moved to the new city, probably even before I started noticing the distance between us. But it wasn't just physical. She had fallen in love with him. And not just in the way you fall in love with someone new. It was deeper. She had been slowly unraveling herself in front of me, piece by piece, and I had no idea. What really shook me, though, wasn't the affair itself. It was what she said next. She told me that she didn't just need to be with him because of love. It was because she had found herself with him, that he'd shown her things about herself that I couldn't. She said he understood her in a way that I never could, and that what they had wasn't just a fling, it was a new life, a new identity. And I was the old life, the one that had to be left behind for something better, something more real. I asked her, how long has this been going on? She said it started gradually, like she was waking up from a dream, but the moment she realized what was happening, she couldn't stop it. It wasn't just about the physical attraction. She had grown emotionally and intellectually attached to him in a way that she hadn't with me in years. It crushed me, but what hurt the most wasn't even that she had fallen in love with someone else, it was the complete betrayal of everything we had been. The life we'd built together didn't mean anything to her anymore, and when I looked at her that night, I didn't recognize her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I had spent the last 10 years with. She had already left. And the worst part? I couldn't hate her. I hated myself for letting it go on for so long without seeing it. I hated that she had become someone else and left me in the dust. But deep down, I knew it was also my fault. I had been blind. I had let the complacency of our relationship make me think everything was fine when, in reality, she had been slowly changing right in front of me. We ended up separating. She moved in with David, and I stayed in the apartment. I don't know if they're still together, and honestly, I don't want to know. I've moved on as best as I can, but the scars remain. And now, every time I meet someone new, there's this question in the back of my mind. What if they're just waiting to leave too? I wish I could say I've learned something profound from this, that I've figured out what went wrong and how to avoid it. But I'm not sure I have. What I do know is this: the person you think you know best might be the person you know the least. I mean, who wants to go back to something that shattered you? But recently, I found myself thinking about it again, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, there's more to this story than I thought. More I haven't told, more that I didn't understand back then. And I guess after all this time, it's time to put it all out there. So, after Emma left after she moved in with David, he tried to move on. I wasn't delusional. I knew I wasn't going to wake up one day and everything would be magically fine. I threw myself into my work, took up new hobbies, started going to therapy, which helped more than I thought it would, and slowly but surely, I started rebuilding my life. But the problem with being abandoned is that it changes how you look at everything. You stop seeing people for who they are and start seeing them for who you think they might become. You start wondering if everyone has an expiration date, or if they're just waiting for the moment when you stop being interesting enough for them to stick around. And it's hard to trust. Not just in romantic relationships, but in friendships, in family, in life in general. After everything I'd been through, I couldn't help but feel like some sort of naive fool who had walked around blind for years, thinking everything was fine when really, I was living in a house of cards. But here's the thing, I didn't know how much deeper this whole thing went. I didn't know that Emma's relationship with David, her new life, as she'd called it, wasn't just about them. No, it was about something much bigger. Something I didn't understand until long after they'd both left. About a month after Emma moved out, I received a letter. No return address, no name on the envelope, just a small, almost unnoticeable stamp that made it seem like it was something official. At first, I thought it was just junk mail, some sort of bank notification, or maybe a tax thing. But when I opened it, I froze. It wasn't from any company or institution. It was from a private investigator. I know it sounds like some bad thriller plot, but hear me out. The letter was brief and to the point. It just said, I have information you need to know. If you want the full story, meet me at the cafe on 5th and Main tomorrow at 10 a.m. And that was it. I'll be honest, he didn't know what to think. I'd been trying to move on. I didn't want anything to do with Emma anymore. I was done. But curiosity, that damn thing that always gets the best of us, gnawed at me. What information? What the hell could it be? I almost threw the letter away, but something in the back of my mind told me I had to know. So, I went. The cafe was one of those places that always felt a little too trendy, dim lighting, overpriced lattes, and that faint smell of vanilla wafting through the air. I took a seat near the window and waited. I didn't know what to expect, but my pulse was racing. I kept looking around, half expecting someone to walk in, someone to drop a bomb on my life that would shatter whatever illusion of peace I'd been trying to create. And then, at exactly 10 a.m., she walked in. It was someone I didn't recognize, but something about her made my skin crawl. She wasn't wearing anything that stood out, just a plain, navy blue coat and glasses, but there was something in her eyes like she knew a secret, one I wasn't supposed to know. She sat down across from me without saying a word, opened a folder, and slid a few photos toward me. I almost didn't want to look, but I did. The first photo was of Emma and David standing on a beach, laughing, with their arms around each other. Nothing unusual about that, right? I mean, it's what I expected. But the next few were different. In the next image, David was standing at the edge of the dock, looking out over the water, and Emma was talking to someone off camera. A man I didn't recognize at first. But the more I looked, the more I began to see the subtle details. His face, the angle of his jaw, the fact that he was wearing the same watch David always wore. I felt my heart stop. Then came the next photo. Emma in a hotel room, alone, but the shadow of a man looming behind her. The same man. This time, he wasn't just standing there. He was holding her. I looked up at the woman across from me. What the hell is this? She leaned forward slightly, her eyes intense. You think it was just a simple affair, don't you? You think Emma and David just fell in love, and everything else was just noise. That's what she told you, right? I didn't know how to answer. My thoughts were racing. What do you mean? Who is this guy? The woman took a deep breath. The man in those photos? His name is Richard. He's someone Emma knew long before she ever met you. He's not just another ex or a random guy from her past. He's someone much more significant, and his relationship with Emma is far more complicated than you think. I sat there, stunned, as the woman continued. Richard and Emma were involved in something more than just a casual fling. They were part of a network, a group of people who have a certain kind of lifestyle, something more dangerous than just an affair, something that's been going on for years, but she's kept it hidden from everyone, including you. I felt my stomach churn. What are you talking about? What kind of network? She slid another photo toward Matthias. One was black and white, but the image was unmistakable. It was a picture of Emma, David, and Richard sitting around a table in what looked like a dimly lit room, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. But it wasn't the people in the photo that made my blood run cold. It was the symbol on the wall behind them. A symbol that I'd seen once before, but never thought twice about. It was a small, discreet design, just a couple of intersecting lines, but now that I saw it in context, I recognized it. I'd seen it on a book Emma used to keep on the shelf in our living room. It was a book she never told me about, a book that she had always kept hidden. I didn't know what to say. My mind was reeling. What is all this? I managed to choke out. The woman didn't answer immediately. She simply leaned back, watching me as though she was waiting for me to process everything. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke. You were never just her husband. You were a pawn in something much bigger, a game she's been playing for years, and I think you deserve to know the truth. I didn't know what to think anymore. My entire life had just been turned upside down again. Everything I thought I knew, every assumption I made about Emma, none of it made sense anymore. She had been living a double life. I was a chapter in her story, not the story itself. But why? Why was she doing this? Why was she pulling me back into this mess? I had to know, and I was going to find out, no matter where it led me. And that's where this story starts to get even weirder. But I'll save that for another time, because the deeper I dug, the more I realized I wasn't just uncovering Emma's secrecy, was stepping into something I wasn't prepared for. Something bigger than I could ever have imagined. I'll be honest, when I walked out of that cafe, I felt like my entire world had just cracked open. I mean, imagine living your life, thinking everything is normal, thinking that the person you've spent the better part of a decade with is just your person. And then you find out that not only have they been hiding secrets, but those secrets are part of something much darker, more twisted than you could have ever imagined. I spent the next few days obsessing over what that woman had said. Richard, in network? Damn, it didn't make sense. It wasn't just Emma's affair I had to contend with. No, it was the fact that this whole thing had been orchestrated. There was a plan, a strategy, and I was just a small, inconsequential part of it. I thought about going to the police. I thought about confronting Emma directly, but even as the anger churned in my gut, I knew I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know what to believe. And what if this was all some elaborate scam designed to pull me back into Emma's world, her world of secrets and lies? What if this woman had an agenda of her own, but I couldn't ignore it? So, I did the only thing I could do. I started digging. I remembered that damn book, the one Emma had always kept hidden. I had tried to look through it once years ago, but she had shut me down quickly. It was a book on philosophy, something about existentialism, the nature of free will, and the human condition. I'd glanced at it, but never really paid attention. Who reads that kind of thing, right? But the thing was, it wasn't just the content that seemed weird, it was the way she kept it hidden. It wasn't on a shelf with her other books like a normal book. It was tucked away in the back of her closet in a box, covered by old winter scarves and forgotten shoes. I don't know why I hadn't made the connection sooner. Maybe I didn't want to see it. But after the cafe, After everything, I had to know what Emma had been hiding all these years. The book was exactly where I remembered it. I pulled it out and blew the dust off, my fingers trembling as I opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, and I noticed something odd right away. Margins were filled with small, precise notes, written in Emma's handwriting. At first, it seemed innocuous enough, just philosophical musings, things like what is reality, and can one truly escape their past? But as I flipped through the pages, the notes started to get darker. There were references to names I didn't recognize, to places I'd never heard of. There were symbols, tiny, almost imperceptible drawings of the same design I'd seen in the photo at the cafe. The one behind Richard, Emma, and David. The more I read, the more I felt this unease spreading through me, like I was uncovering something ancient and dangerous. But it wasn't until I reached the last few pages that things really started to click. There, at the end of the book, in the final chapter, there was a handwritten note. The game is in motion. I have fulfilled my role. Everything leads to the final move. You are a piece on the board, my love, but so am I. We are both expendable. I sat there, frozen, staring at those words. It was like a punch to the gut. She had been playing me, but how far did this go? And what was this game she was talking about? I couldn't just let it go. I needed answers. The next few days felt like I was living in some sort of twisted reality. I started tracing the names and places Emma had mentioned in her notes. Some of it led nowhere, just obscure references to philosophical texts or random internet posts. But one name kept coming up over and over again, the Circle. It sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory, but it was real, and it was everywhere in Emma's writings. The more I searched, the more I found. The Circle wasn't just a philosophy group. It wasn't just some intellectual pursuit. It was an organization known with deep ties in both the corporate world and the underground. I found references to secret meetings, coded messages, and bizarre rituals, and everything pointed back to Emma, to Richard, and to David. But then, a breakthrough. I was at my lowest point, sleep-deprived, paranoid, obsessed, when I received another message. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was a phone call. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was calm, cold, calculated. You're getting too close, the voice said. Stop looking into the circle. It won't end well for you. I felt my blood run cold. My first instinct was to hang up, but I didn't. I stayed on the line. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. The voice chuckled softly. You've already met us. All of us. We've been playing this game for a long time, and you were always just one of the pieces. I felt a chill run through me. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. You were never the real target. But now that you're so involved, we can't just let you walk away. No one walks away from the circle, especially not someone like you. The call ended abruptly, leaving me in stunned silence. What did that even mean? What had Emma gotten herself into? I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went back to the apartment. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. I wasn't sure if I was looking for closure, or if I was just hoping that anything would make sense of all this chaos. And that's when I found it. Tucked away in the back of the closet, behind boxes of old clothes, was a small, unmarked envelope. It was thick and felt heavier than it should have been. When I opened it, I found a set of photos. The first one was of Emma, but this time, she wasn't smiling. She looked terrified, as if she was trapped. The second photo was even more chilling. Emma was standing in front of a dark figure, someone I didn't recognize. And the third photo? With a picture of me, but I wasn't in it alone. There, standing next to me, was David and Richard, and the dark figure in the background was the leader of the circle. And then, there was a note. You were never meant to be part of this, but you have played your part. Everything will come full circle, as it always does. Everything was suddenly clear, but the clarity was worse than the confusion. Emma had been preparing me for something. She had orchestrated my role in this whole game, and now I was caught. The photos, the messages, the symbols, it was all a puzzle I had been solving without realizing it. But now, the puzzle was complete.